I was recently at a cute little boutique at a local mall near my house doing a little shopping, and I saw a really cute quilted vest. And the first thing I thought to myself was, I can make that myself and I'll be trendy. But then the next thing I thought was, vests are perfect for fall. What happens in the fall? Halloween, and I love Halloween. So I decided that I was going to use the Unique 19X Elite to quilt some fabric so I could make this really cute holiday vest for Halloween. Okay, first you're going to need to select a pattern. You can get patterns online, you can order them from online stores. I just went into my bin of paper patterns because I made a couple of holiday vests for other holidays with this one here, although I'm pretty much just using the paper portion of the pattern to be able to cut the shape, since I have everything else will be quilted and all the backing and everything will be on the frame. So you don't have to necessarily get a full-on paper pattern, get the simplest one that you want, just something that you will use to trace out the pattern. The one I'm wearing, I misplaced this one and I couldn't find it, so I actually have some drafting rulers and attempted to kind of draft it to my shape. Whatever you do, you're going to want to measure yourself in various areas and follow those measurements that are on the back of your pattern or that are online, because pattern sizes, paper pattern sizes are way different than when you go to the store to get clothes. They're not vanity sizes. They're set up so that there's lots of different sizes so you can select the one that's right for you. So don't get hung up on, oh, it says I'm a 22, but normally I'm a 12. They do not correspond. They are not the same thing. So check those out. Once you figure out what size you are, it's going to tell you some basics on how much fabric that you're going to need, and that's how you're going to figure out how much fabric that you need for this. And then just when you're going to cut your fabric, you're just going to cut your rectangles a little bit larger for that. Keep in mind, it does tell you lining, maybe interfacing, things like that. Really kind of take a close look at the pattern so you don't get too much fabric. A couple ways that you can do it. So you see this one, I did some large blocks on it because I just really loved the fabric. And it's one of the reasons that I really love Halloween. I know Halloween's not everybody's cup of tea per se, but I love the fun, funky fabrics that you get in Halloween that you just really don't get in other times of the year. I love the colors. I love just dressing up and having fun. And that's the part of Halloween that really speaks to me, just having fun and being a kid again and dressing up and getting to be somebody different for a day. That's what I really love about it. So I went with these, but if Halloween is not your cup of tea, you could just use fall colors or fall fabrics. I've seen some really cute fall fabrics out there, or you could turn this into your favorite Christmas vest or holiday vest or Hanukkah vest or Easter. I'd say 4th of July, but unless you live up north, it's probably a little warm for a quilted vest for 4th of July, but you can use whatever fabric you want. I just thought, I don't have a Halloween vest, and so let's make one for this. Another reason why I picked a vest is it is fall. And fall is that time of year where it gets a little chilly in the morning, but if I wear a coat, I'm going to be way too hot all day. Right? So if I have a jacket, I don't want sleeves. I want just maybe a little bit of warmth, maybe a light sweater or something. So a vest gives you that little extra warmth without all the bulk. And so that's what makes that fun as well. All right, so that's what I did with this one. I did a larger piece on the back because, again, I really like that. With the one I'm going to show you today, I did smaller blocks. And I, just cut a bunch of little blocks and sewed them together with some fat quarters. So you can use fat quarters for this project as well. But you are going to need a big piece for your backing. That backing piece needs to be big enough for both of the rectangles that you're going to cut out, and you're not going to cut them out because we're going to do all that quilting on the frame. Same thing with your batting. You want a big piece of batting that's going to be a little bit longer than both of your rectangles if you were to put those on there. And like I said, don't cut that. You'll have a couple of extra pieces of batting that you will cut for pockets, but outside of that, those pieces are going to be whole. You're only going to have the 2 larger rectangles for your back and what's going to make up your 2 sides. And you're not even going to worry about cutting this until it's time to do some assembling. One other thing I want to talk about for things that you're going to need, in addition to a little bit of extra fabric, because you can see we're going to do some binding to finish off our quilted edges, but let's talk batting. This is a wearable. So I want to pick a batting that's not too thick unless I want it really puffy. I tend to get a little warm sometimes, so I want something that's breathable. So I'm not going to use anything that's like 100% polyester or bamboo, which is something we use a lot since it's sustainable. I'm going to go with something that's like 100% cotton or 80-20 cotton, no more than 80-20, because I want something that's going to be breathable. The 80-20 is going to give me a little bit more or less shrinkage, so if you're worried about that, you can go with that and you'll get some of that breathability. But if you run hot or synthetics irritate your skin, go 100% cotton. So that's what I recommend for that as well. One of the things that I decided for making my pockets and also the backing of the other one is you can get panels. Panels are good size for making stuff, and then you just have a solid piece that you can just kind of decorate, or if you want to make it a little bit bigger, you can with some additional fabric. So that's one of the things we did with that as well, just to make it fun and funky, and be creative, pick what you like and so on. One other thing I do want to mention real quickly, if you are concerned about shrinkage, you're going to want to pre-wash your fabric, which we talked about over the summer. Same thing with your batting. So be sure that you prepare it properly to do that. I don't mind the wrinkly look when I wash this, so I did not pre-wash my fabrics. But if that is a concern for you, go ahead and pre-wash that, iron it, and starch it so that it's easier to cut and assemble. I'm going to use the diamond foot to create the look I want on this part of my vest. To use it, line your ruler up against the edge of the diamond foot, and that will help you get the perfect diagonal line. Sew along the edge of the quilt until the edge of the diamond foot lines up with the previous row, and this is going to give you regularly spaced intervals between those lines. I'll use the ruler also to keep my needle in the ditch as I move to the next starting position. Continue on with this process until it's time to switch the direction of your diagonal line. When you do that, you're going to move your ruler to the other side of the diamond foot and continue to sew. Just remember to move the edge of the diamond foot so it lines up with the previous row, and repeat the diagonal lines, but now in the other direction. I really love this foot and the texture and interest it creates to any quilt, especially with those borders. So I've switched to the square foot so I can do a little bit more straight line ruler work. But if you're wondering how can you tell if your attachment is the square or the diamond, let's take a look. So if you look at the one I have attached, the dark mark on the attachment is in the center here of a flat side. And any of these that you put on, you always line up the red part to the black and then twist to lock it in place. So that's going to give you the square one. If you take a look at the diamond one, you'll notice that the mark is in the corner. So when you do the same thing, you get more of a diamond shape. So that's just a quick way to be able to tell the difference between those two attachments. All right, so I'm going to do some tracing around these squares here, and I'm not working down here anymore, so if I was smart, what I would do is I would loosen this and just bring this towards me a little bit. I am such a shorty, so that I don't have to get on my tippy toes, and you don't have to go, why are you on your tippy toes? When you set your frame heights and your handles and all that, you want to do it in a way that's comfortable for you. All right, that's going to get me to everywhere I need to be. Just adjust my bungees more in the center. I'm happy with that. All right, so we'll go ahead and start in this corner here. Line that up. Bring up the I have this on cruise because I am doing ruler work, and I do like the fact that when I am in cruise mode, when I choose to stop, it will stop in the down position because that's how I have it set. Couple stitches in that position. Real nice comfortable handles, easy access. Even with my tiny little fingers, I can easily move between the buttons. I'm going to go down the side here. Go across. So I am going against the happy direction of the machine. So I'm going to go slow and I'm going to keep an eye on this. It's always really better to go left to right when you're doing a straight stitch like this, but that can be really inconvenient. But I did start up there. So if I go slow and I pay attention, I should be okay. I just don't want to over torque on the hook. And that will often happen if I'm going way too fast. All right, so I'm going to go up, and so I'm going to be kind of stitching in the ditch here along the edge. All right, I'm going to fasten off. And now I'm going to do the stitch in the ditch along the bottom here. I'm going to start here in the corner because I need to finish my stitch in the ditch there. Bring that bobbin thread up, line it up. Notice if I just don't quite get there, I can just do a single stitch by pushing my button here and get exactly in the corner where I want to be. All right, so we're just going to finish this side up here. Okay, so again, gonna go righty-lefty really slow so I can finish off here. Just check that I'm still nice and straight with my thread. So I'm done with the stitch in the ditch portion. I'm going to fasten off because I'm going to change my attachment again. So easy. And this time I'm going to switch to the glide. The glide foot is like a little bowl, so it won't get caught on anything. It will just easily glide over things. And I like this one because it is clear, and sometimes it just helps me be able to see a little bit better when I'm doing my free motion. Notice every time that I change my foot, I do check my height. Feel like that's a little too low. All right, so let's do some free motion. Now these are actually going to be the areas that are partially covered by the pockets that I'm going to add here in a little bit. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not worried about doing anything too fancy of a design here. I'm only going to see part of it, but I want to make sure that the material is nice and adhered to the batting, right? The batting that I'm using says that you can have a distance of 8 inches between quilting lines, but I still want to create some consistency. I'm going to go ahead and start in a corner, bring up my bobbin, and then just free motion whatever I want to do. I'll probably do a little loop-to-loops. Trace around these edges a little bit. Slow down and trace around the kitty cat. And I'll just make it pop a little bit when I look inside to get something out of my pocket. But you can see with the glide foot, it's really easy to get around things. See how smooth the 19 is in its stitching. And I'm pretty pleased with that. So just want a little something to hold the 2 layers of fabric nicely. Come over here to the witch's hat. And I think what I might do over here is I might do some free motioning with this web design. I really like spiders. I have a background in entomology, so I really have appreciation for what they're capable of doing and an interest. And so a lot of beautiful spider webs are just really neat to me. I'll just kind of trace over that. Do want that witch's hat to pop, so I'll kind of start with going around that and her potions bottle. Maybe do some fun things in the broom. Rats, on the other hand, not my favorite. But again, you can see I'm really just using one hand. That's how light this machine is. Maybe do some triangles here so I can create a neat spider web in the hat. Okay. So I'm going to change my foot one more time, and I'm going to show you something a little bit different that is not quilting, that is going to save me some time when I go to do my assembly. So I'm just going to put my regular hopping foot on for this. Remember, every time I change my feet, I want to check my height. And I'm going to have some additional thickness here. So I'm just going to put one of these under just so I make sure I get the right height for what it is that I'm going to be working on. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. As high as I can get it for the thickness I'm working with. Okay, so I have my 2 pockets. I'm just going to move that out of the way for a minute. I have my 2 pockets that I want to add on, and like I said, I marked here so I knew where I was going to be ending my cut for when I cut this into the 2 pieces for like the front here of the vest. So I know that I want to have it a few inches above this line is where I'm going to want my pocket to end. Okay, so once I kind of decide where I want the pocket to be, and I think I want to kind of center it up with the designs that I have, I can double check with a longer ruler and make sure that I'm even. So I think I'll do 1/4 of an inch from this square here. All right, once I have that, I'm going to mark with something erasable. I'm just going to move this out of the way. I'm working with a lot of dark fabric here, so I am just using a white chalk pencil. I do like pens better, but I haven't found a white pen that I like really well that irons off nicely, so I'm just going to use this chalk one. All right, and then that will erase once I kind of throw it in the washer, a little bit of water. So now that I have where I want my pocket to end, I need to consider my seam allowance. So I'm going to line my ruler up so that I am 1/4 of an inch above the line that I just drew. I'm going to draw another line. That's why it's important that I can see really well where I drew that. Right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this so that the rough edge of my pocket, so the bottom of my pocket, is going to line up with that edge, okay? I'm going to make this a little bit easier for you to see by rolling this up a little. I'm going to check that I look center to my pattern. Okay, and now I am going to bring my machine over. And you could also do this with a ruler foot if you're just concerned that you're not going to get a good 1/4 of an inch, but I think at this point I feel pretty confident. Do want to still pull up my bobbin just so I don't get a knot. Double check where I want to get started. Make sure I'm still lined up. I'm going to do a little bit of what you would call a back stitch if you were on your domestic machine or the Little Rebel. So I'm going to go forward first a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to go back a couple of stitches so that I've got a nice secure start, and I'm just going to sew this down, sewing my about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. When I get to the other end, same thing, just a little back and forth. Fasten off, repeat for the other side. And double check my alignment, forward and back a little bit. So across, back and forth a little bit, and fasten off. Okay, so I've now attached the bottom of my pockets. I'm going to flip them up, and I'm going to start at the top of where I want to sign. If you feel like you need to pin this down to keep it in place, do that. Same thing, going to bring my bobbin up and down. This is going to be where your pocket gets a lot of wear and tear, so again, I'm going to do several front and back stitches. And I do like to go just over a little bit, over the edge of the top of the pocket there, and then I'm going to sew my pocket down. I'm going to feel, because I know that I want to finish the inside part of my edge here. So as soon as I kind of feel where that is, you can see I kind of mark that with my nail. This is where I'm going to stop, and I'm just going to sew right across there, and that is going to finish the edge on the inside of my pocket. And now we're going to go up. Bet you never thought that you could put a pocket on using your frame and your 19X. Again, some stitches back and forth so it's nice and secure. And then this way I don't have to fight a bunch of thickness underneath the domestic machine. I mean, I'm still going to have to do that when I do my assembly, but it's just going to make it a little bit easier. Note to make sure that I'm going left to right when I put my pocket on. When I'm sewing at the bottom, I'm starting at the top of my pocket, my top left of my pocket. So notice that I'm starting at the top left side of my pocket, so that when I do my straight stitch across the bottom, I'm going left to right. So again, remember to go over the pocket a couple times in that wear part so that your pocket doesn't rip off from use. Feel for where that lump is going to be so you know where to stop to finish off. And then we're going to take it back up. And do some back and forth again on this side so it's nice and secure. All right, now we're ready to take it off the frame, start cutting our pieces for our vest, and start our assembly. All right, so I have removed it from the frame. You can see the top, what I'm going to use for the back here and what I'm going to use for the front. So the first thing I'm really just going to do is just trim my rectangles down off of the backing so that I have something that's a little bit easier to work with. I don't really need to be precise. I'm not trying to square it up or anything like that because I have a pattern I'm going to be using for doing the cutting. All right, so the one I put the pockets on is obviously going to be the front like I have here. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to center up and I'm going to cut this in half, right? Because I'm going to have a left side and a right side of my vest. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is a nice pattern. So it makes it really easy for me to see how to line that up. Okay, so I have those two pieces ready to go. So I'm just going to move some of this out of the way. If you've never worked with a paper pattern before, this is my back, so let me set that to the side here. If it is going to cover multiple sizes, you're going to have different lines to cut. So I've already cut this one for my size that I'll be using for this. I primarily was more concerned about like the curve here and here. I want my vest to be a little bit more open. The design of this one actually has it a little bit more closed, so it's really on this side that I'm concerned about. I'm very short torsoed, so you can see with this pattern there's often lines where you can lengthen or shorten. And so I use that to kind of shorten that as well. Sometimes I'll have like notches for them. You won't have to worry about any of that for this. You are only using the paper to get the shape. So if you've never dealt with it, never read a pattern that had to do with clothing, you don't have to worry about that right now. It's really just to help you get the right shape for that, okay? So I'll keep these in the way that I want them to be. And I'm going to kind of line this edge up. Okay, so I want to make sure I get my pocket. Right, and a couple inches past that pocket. Then once I've pretty much decided where I want that to be, you can pin this down. So I'm going to go grab some pins. It just makes it a little bit easier to deal with cutting the pattern. You can also use weights if you have things that you can just get on there, but you don't want it to move on you when you're trying to get this cut, right? So just a couple of pins to hold the pattern in place. I don't even have to worry about fishing them through because I'm not moving it. I just don't want to shuffle that paper while I'm trying to do stuff, okay? And I do like using sometimes rulers. I've been using straight cutters to do these kind of things as well. So I'll just use the ruler and just kind of push it with me as I am creating a guide just so that I don't cut too much of my paper. If you feel comfortable, you can do it without. I'm doing that for a while. Now that I'm sure which side I have, just want to move that out of my way so I have some room to work. Cut that off. Some people like to use like the tracing paper so that they don't mess up their patterns. So they can keep all the different sizes that they have. That's an option as well. I'm only making for me, so I only worry about the one size that I need. There's some extra, I don't know what I'll do with it, but I can find something to do with it. All right, so I have the shape of my first one. So I'm going to take the pins off. So remember we had it this way. We'll put this one this way. And now I want the opposite side. So I'm going to flip my pattern. So I can use this to kind of line up where I was with stuff, so that I can get this one aligned nicely as well. pretty good. Okay, here is my back. Now I did kind of create a design here in the quilting that now makes this fabric one directional, so I need to really think about that when I am putting my pattern on. You'll notice that my back pattern is only a half. It's half the back. So you're going to want to fold your fabric. So whether you want to fold it this way or the other way, doesn't matter. But if you're worried about making sure that whatever pattern that you designed is centered. Now I know that I did 10 of these little squares, so the center part of this would be the seam that connects 5 and 5. Right. So I just want to kind of press that down, finger press it. You could use the iron if you needed it, but that seems to be folding fine. This is the top of the spider that I made, so I want to make sure that I have that where I want it. And then this straight edge is the edge that goes against the fold. So when I cut this and this and this and unfold it, I'm going to have one piece. Just have to decide where I want it. I think I like that. So again, I'll pin it in place. So because I am going through so many layers of fabric, I am just going to use my fabric scissors for this one. I think it'll just be easier. Especially in these corners. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a little rough because we're going to bind it. So any roughness that we have in our cutting is going to disappear. So, and if I cut it properly, which I did, see I have one big piece for the back. So that's a little thing with paper patterns you need to kind of think about. All right, so I have my pieces. Here's my back, right side up. Here's my front. All right, so I'm going to flip it wrong sides together because, again, I'm using binding to finish this off. So I'm going to start by aligning these edges here. So if you have your shoulder seams, I want to align these the best that I can, and I'm going to clip those. I like to start with a little scrap of fabric so I can get that out of the, all my threads out of the way. Get that lined up, and I'm just doing 1/4 of an inch. A lot of times with clothing they tell you 5/8 of an inch, which is fine. It's just because this is quilted, when I go to bind this, I don't want a really thick seam, so I'm sticking with the 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to line up my sides the best that I can. I do like my backs a little bit different in shape than the front, and that's how this one was designed, so that'll be fine. I also like to put a little split, so I'm not going to sew all the way down anyway, just like I did with this one here. You can see I put the little split, so. And then we'll sew down that side. I'm going to do a little back stitching here because this is going to be a place that when I go to put the binding, it'll be a weak link if I don't do some back stitching here to really secure this corner. we go. Give myself a little bit more than an inch. And back stitch to secure. Okay. And then we're going to add the other side as well. So we have it pretty much assembled now. Now it's all about finishing. And we're going to finish with binding. So let's make some binding. We do have some curves. You could, when you make your binding, do bias binding. I didn't. I just snipped along as I went. It worked just fine because they're not super curvy. And I just used leftover strips that I had from when I was making it. So instead of having to have another piece that's really large to fold over and do that, I just kind of winged it with that. So depending on where I'm doing the binding is going to depend on what size I want to use for the binding. So I'm just going to kind of start with this double folded strip here because I think it's going to be long enough for me to do. And I can check it for me to do the binding here, and it is, okay? So since I am not, this part of the binding that I'm using is just to finish this edge, which is just 2-fold here, I'm just gonna do 2 1/4 binding for that. And I'm gonna need 2 pieces. So I'll fold it back in half. My edge is not straight, so I'm gonna just take a little snippet off so I can straighten my edge first. Bye-bye. Line up my 2 1/4, get right in that groove. That's for one side. And this is for the other side. Okay, so I'll set these aside for now. And I'm just going to do traditional binding in terms of the fold. I'm not going to do any of that fancy double fold stuff. Make sure my iron is hot enough. And get rid of that wrinkle where it was folded. So I'm just going to fold this over. These are small pieces of binding in comparison to other stuff that you do when you're binding a quilt, so I'm not worrying about having to do any attachment of the fabric or anything. Lining up those edges, getting a good crease for that. All right, so now I'm going to line this up on my front piece, and I want it to fold inside like this so I have the nice seam on the outside. So that's why I am layering this on this portion here, right? So that I will do this, fold over, and then stitch in the ditch on the other side. All right, so I am coming to a little bit of a point here. Right. So it's not enough of a corner to really do like a miter corner or anything like that. So I'm just going to give it a little snip, and this is going to give me some flexibility to bend a little through here. right, so that's ready to sew. All right, so something I want you to note on this as well is I do not want to cover this portion yet with the binding because I'm going to have a totally different strip of binding for this one. So I just need to get my binding up to here with my sewing, okay? So I find it easiest to get in position and just backstitch to where I want to start and then go forward from there. Okay, so now I am going to leave a little bit here, even it's not sewn down, but I don't need all of that for when I flip. So I'm just going to cut off the excess. Get rid of my tails. And now I'm going to fold it over and clip it in place. So you can see this is tighter binding than the 2.5, but I'm not going through as much, so it's going to be fine. I just wanted something to finish that nice edge. Just make sure that your binding is up against it, the edge of your sandwiched fabric that you've quilted. All right, so now I'm ready to stitch in the ditch. So I'm going to get that lined up. Okay, so I have my front finish on. And so now I'm going to worry about this binding here. Now, since I'm actually covering a seam, I'm going to cut 2.5-inch binding for it. So I'll use that little piece that I had left over. Line that up on the 2.5. And then we're making the binding the same way we made the other binding. All right, so I am going to do this one a little bit different, but I'm going to start out the same way. I'm eventually going to want to flatten this seam. So I want to kind of think about that when I'm putting my binding on. Since this is the front, and that's what people are going to see most of the time when they're looking at you, I'm going to line up that edge on this side, okay? But I'm going to line it up a little bit lower because I want to flatten this out later. So that probably seems a little bit different. Pin it in place if you need to pin it, and I'll do that on both of those. So I've reached a point, because I've got it assembled, it's time to get rid of the base. I need more closer work. So that is what is really great about the versatility of this. Big base when I need it, smaller base when I don't. Now I've got the space that I need to be able to get underneath here. And I am going to sew over my binding that I attached to the front. I don't want too lumpy of a seam. I'm going to do some top stitching that's going to help with that as well. But I want to try to open up this seam. It's not going to open up perfect because it is a tight seam and it's thick. It's still going to be thick. But I want to get this opened up as much as I can and kind of press it the best that I can just to kind of flatten that out a little bit. Really don't care so much about the fabric as much as I do the underneath parts with the batting. And then I'm going to fold this over like this, and I'm going to pin this, and then I'm going to sew along this part as a top stitch, and that's going to seal this up. And then I'll probably do another top stitch on this side, and that's going to help flatten that out. All this throat space here makes it so easy to get this lined up. So if you want to kind of catch it on the edge, so I'm doing about an 1/8 of an inch stitch here. Okay, so now I need to get my tape measure out because I need to cut some binding again that's going to go from here across to here. And for this side as well. And then I have the piece that I need to do along the bottom. We'll have a little overlap on this one as well, which we will hide when we get to finishing the armholes. Now this one I'm going to do backwards, and my main reason for that has to do with covering this edge, okay? So that's why this one will have the thicker part on the outside than the other bindings that we have done. So this one's going to cover over that seam that created our sides. Whoops. There we go. So keep that a nice tight 1/4 of an inch. Make sure your corner's tucked in nicely on the edge there. I'm going to use a big binding clip for this one. All right, now we can finish this up. So we'll do the exact same thing on the other side, and then we do the armholes, and then we are ready to wear. I'm going to sew directly on the back of the binding here. With a little bit of a back stitch. Try that now. Whoops, wrong button. Again, if you need to clip that other one out of the way or pin that other side out of the way, do so you don't accidentally sew it. I'm just gonna get this started up here, and then I will flip it over like I would normally do and do stitch in the ditch. It's just with the corner there and how we go from the inside to the outside. This is just going to make it a little bit easier. Make sure I'm in a good spot here before I hit the start button. Okay. So fold that back over, finish at the top with your stitch in the ditch. And then I just have a little bit of unpicking of this one where I'd started and I didn't get the best overlap, but that was really loose anyway. And then we have our finished edge. So that's pretty much how we will finish the other side. To learn more about the Kanique 19X Elite, please visit our website at graceframe.com and click on machines. I sure hope that this project has inspired you to try something new with your quilting and make something that's fun and wearable. Until next time, I hope you sew with love and grace.